Ever since 2021, the Detroit Lions have gone through a massive cultural landscape overhaul. However, though, has one part of this cultural landscape become way too rough and a little bit too much? We're going to talk about it in this episode, folks, so don't you dare go anywhere.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions fans, and welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So here's the thing, folks. This episode today is based off of a conversation that I had with a fan. They decided to direct message me. And I'm not going to reveal what I had as far as that direct conversation with the fan because that's private. And obviously they're going to trust me to keep it private unless, of course, they were to tell me that it would be okay to let that conversation be known. But all intents and purposes here, I thought the conversation topic was a really good topic, so I decided to kind of do a little bit more research. I decided to put a little bit more thought into it. I decided to do a little bit more of a comprehensive overhaul, if you will, to make it into a video topic. Now, let's kind of take a look at this, kind of go down a little bit of memory lane, kind of take a little look at history before we kind of delve into it. Because when you think about it, let's go back to 2021 when Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, they were both hired. When those two men were hired, it was almost immediate that there was something that was inherently different about the Detroit Lions aura. There was something different about how the team was going to be, how the team operated, how the team was, just going forward. And once Dan Campbell kind of got into the building, he brought to the team almost immediately a toughness that kind of was like having old leather. It was kind of like a hickory tree. He just brought that to the Detroit Lions because it was a direct product. It was a direct reflection of Dan Campbell. It's like, listen, we are, if nothing else, going to be tough. And we're also going to be hard workers. Well, think about it, folks. That toughness has then directly led into exactly what this hat is talking about. It's led into the grit mindset, the grit identity. And that word, grit, has now become a rallying cry in Detroit for the Lions. And the Lions definitely needed to have toughness. They definitely needed to have that gritty mindset, that gritty identity in the beginning because they were going to have thick skin. They were going to have patience. They were going to have to be able to take all of the freaking, nonsense that was going to happen in the early stages. Because for the first year and a half of the Campbell-Holmes era, there were tons of jabs, there were tons of insults, barbs, and a whole bunch of other stuff that was thrown not only at the organization, but also to some of the players that were on the team as well. I mean, It was kind of a bit of a tough time for the first year and a half of the Lions organization with Campbell and Holmes in charge. Not saying that as a bad reflection on them, it was just, hey, it takes time to turn things around. However, though, like I just said, slowly over time, the Lions lost that appearance of what we had been known as for the longest time as lovable losers, which was something that, we had long been called by game announcers, we had been called by game broadcasters, analysts, whatever the case was. We lost that appearance. But we also started having less jabs, less insults, less barbs, and a whole bunch of other stuff thrown our way as well. Well, by the time we got to the end of 2022, the Lions had become a team that some people were starting to say, hey, a lot of these moves are making good progress. A lot of these moves are going in the right direction. If they continue to do the trend that they've been doing, we could see the Lions being a team that's not only on the rise, but they could actually contend very quickly. But by the time the 2023 draft rolled around, the Lions had then come to add a new identity. They had come to add yet another viewpoint, if you will, to not only the grit mindset that we had long had. And that is when we got the villain identity. Now, the villain identity got started by two different things happening in 2023. The first was when GM Brad Holmes, he showed up to the combine and he was wearing this white hoodie, white sweatshirt, whatever you want to call it, and it had in the background a Detroit Lions logo, but over top of that, it had the word villain on it. And obviously, all the Lions fans, they noticed that, it caught their eye, and they instantly wanted to get their hands on that shirt. And for the most part, nobody's been able to find where that shirt was made. Nobody's been able to find how that shirt was made. It was kind of like a custom job for Brad Holmes. But at the combine, the person that was interviewing Brad Holmes asked him, hey, what exactly does that mean? And what Brad Holmes pretty much said was kind of a bit of a short answer, kind of a bit of a coy answer. And pretty much what he said was it was a mindset, it was an identity that the scouting department for the Detroit Lions had adopted. But he didn't really go any further than that to explain it. It actually didn't get explained in full detail later until Chris Spielman said that, hey, what the Lions were trying to do is they wanted to draft players that were going to pose a serious problem to opposing teams, and as such, they were going to be villains to opposing teams. And that's exactly what that was intended to be as far as the villain mindset. So that was the first way that this whole villain identity, this whole villain mindset got started. But what the true, how do I say this? And I don't even mean true in the sense that it was actually literally the true version of it. But what might have been the true version that a lot of people now take the villain identity as was when it took on a different meaning, a different life of its own, when the Detroit Lions had C.D. Deuce, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Because what C.D. Deuce did is he took that word and he turned it into what some people now view it as. And that is that the Detroit Lions are going to destroy you. And not necessarily destroy you just because we have better talent, not necessarily because we put more points on the board, because we're not necessarily going to play fair when we do it. And if you think about it, this got started when C.D. Deuce kind of put out there at the very first home game for the Detroit Lions in 2023, because the very first game we played was in Kansas City. The very first home game we played, he told all the Detroit Lions fans he wanted the Lions fans to come out to the game wearing blue ski masks. And the thing of the matter is that as soon as he said that, you could not find a blue ski mask anywhere in the freaking state of Michigan. They sold out everywhere. Well, problem was, we lost that game. But the thing of the matter is that all of a sudden, now you had this entire fan base that was energized by this villain identity, this villain mindset. But for some people, they were like, well, if we're going to have that mindset, if we're going to have that identity, we have to be able to back it up on the field. Well, even though we weren't able to back it up in that game, the problem was the message had already been sent around the league. And for some people, it was giving a perspective that the Lions were giving off a bad boy vibe. They were giving off a bad identity with this whole villain mindset that C.D. Deuce had inflamed. Well, here's the problem. Here's where I'm going with this whole conversation. C.D. Deuce is now gone, but the villain mindset as he promoted it, well, my question is, has it gone with him? If it's not gone, is it still something that's relevant to the organization now? And can the Lions still keep it in what was the intended purpose, the intended scope of it, or has it become something that has been completely tainted by C.D. Deuce's negative impact? That's where we're going to have this conversation. Because let's first and foremost understand and ask ourselves the question that if the villain mindset actually has any merit or use for the Lions, that's where we're going to start. Does it actually have a point for us anymore? Is it something that we actually have merit to use in it? And obviously, the Lions want to prove the doubters wrong. They want to prove the naysayers wrong. Because I'm going to tell you this right now, just from a personal perspective. Nothing is more satisfying than watching haters having to eat their crow and shut the hell up. I have had several instances now as a podcaster where it's like, okay, I've been able to say, to my naysayers, to my doubters, hey, you were wrong. It's time for you to shut the hell up and let somebody else do the talking. And getting back to the point of where I'm talking about with this episode, while the Lions are now considered one of the best teams in the NFL, and they are considered by many a Super Bowl contender, not many actually think the Lions are, one, going to actually win the Super Bowl if they get there, and two, not a whole lot of people consider the Lions to be a potential dynasty building kind of mode. They don't think that the Lions are going to be able to have sustained success in going to the Super Bowl. Again, that is one of those things where I've talked in the past that I think the Lions are moving to trying to prove their doubters wrong. So in one sense, having that villain mindset, having that villain identity to have another motivation factor to prove haters wrong, to be a villain, to spoil their, whole thought process, to make them eat their crow, is definitely something that is filled with merit. This mindset also plays into the fact that the Lions are going to let their work on the field do the talking for them in terms of their draft picks, in terms of their win-loss record. They're not going to do the talking with their mouths. They're going to be like, okay, fine, you don't think we can play, we're going to show you we can play. We're going to show you and how we play, what championships we garner. Like I said, our win-loss record, so on and so forth. And for the most part, this lines up exactly with what Chris Spielman spoke of in terms of what the Lions viewed the mindset as not necessarily a physical manifestation of the style of play, which leads into the second aspect of the villain mindset, which is what C.D. Deuce turned it into. Now, the second aspect, like I said, is the physical manifestation of this. And that was the one that C.D. Deuce really freaking inflamed. Because it prompted people around the NFL and some people in our own fan base to view the Lions in some instances as, oh, well, the Lions are now being dirty. Now, that is something that, depending upon who you talk to, is really going to start a huge argument. Because, how do I put this? There are people around the NFL that, because of this whole villain mindset, this whole villain identity, they have now looked at the Lions as being dirty, or even further extremes, being a cheating team, and that the villain mindset has backfired from what the intended purpose of it was. And this viewpoint stems from a couple of instances that occurred specifically during the 2023 season. And all of these instances that I'm talking about, they happened in very relatively quick succession. The first main instance where this happened was in the second Vikings game at the very end of the season, which happened on Christmas Eve. And in that game, if you guys know what I'm talking about, great. If not, I'm going to give you the explanation really quickly. It was in the third quarter. Kirby Joseph took a low hit, even though it was a legal hit, on TJ Hawkinson, which resulted in a serious knee injury to Hawkinson's right knee, where his ACL and his MCL were torn. People took a look at that hit, and some of them thought it was a dirty hit. Some of them thought that Kirby Joseph might have been targeting. Some people thought that Kirby Joseph was trying to intentionally do harm to Hawkinson. But the point of the matter is that it was not an illegal hit. It is a totally legal hit. It still is a legal hit. So that was the first instance where this happened. The second instance happened in the very next week in the Dallas game. And that was when the Lions got the stupid, infamous call from Brad Allen of the ineligible men downfield being called against left tackle Taylor Decker on a design trick play. Now, some people around the NFL, they viewed this as the Lions were trying to confuse the refs with who was being reported as the eligible man for the play. By the fact that when you take a look at the replay, people want to say, oh, well, Taylor Decker was in the area, but also tackle Dan Skipper was in the same area as well. And so people were trying to say that, oh, the Lions were trying to confuse the refs as to who was the eligible man to be reporting in. But we have seen so much visual evidence now that proves that this is not even close to the reality. It's wrong. Brad Allen, first and foremost, by reports, did not even attend the pre-game meeting in the locker rooms to know what trick plays were going to potentially be called by both teams. Because in that meeting, both teams are going to show up and they're going to say, hey, this is the kind of trick plays that we may run, and they will draw it out on a board and they will say, hey, this is how this play is supposed to be ran. Brad Allen did not attend that meeting. He was not there. So that's red flag number one. But also, number two, like I said, there's visual evidence that proves that this is not the case. First and foremost, Decker got to Brad Allen before Skipper did. Number two, we've had visual evidence that shows that when in the huddle, Jared Goff beckoned Taylor Decker to go outside the huddle and to go report in to go report into Brad Allen. And then on top of that, if not to make things worse, after everything had happened where the play was ran, the flag was thrown, you can literally see on the sideline, Dan Campbell is livid. He is shouting. He is screaming. He is literally, you can read his lips even though you can't hear it. He's saying, I told you. Because like I said, they had a meeting in the locker room where it was like, we told you what we were going to do, but yet you still called the play illegal. So the whole point of the matter is there's all this evidence that proves the Lions were not trying to cheat. But yet there are people out there, because of this villain mindset, in my opinion, to a certain degree, who viewed the Lions as trying to cheat. Well, the NFL obviously was going to side with the ref on this because they're not going to overturn a call. But the NFL, to a certain degree, decided to say that Brad Allen was also at fault because they didn't allow him to referee any playoff games as a result of what happened. So in my honest opinion, it was a final admission of guilt on the part of the NFL that, yeah, this was kind of a screw-up by the ref, but we're not going to overturn the call because that's not how the NFL does things. And regardless of any video proof that I just talked about, there remains controversy, and there are those that believe that the Lions, like I said, tried to cheat. Then the final incident, was then 2 weeks later in the wild card playoff game against the LA Rams. And again, this was almost an exact repeat of what had happened on Christmas Eve at the Vikings game to TJ Hawkinson. Again, safety Kirby Joseph. He's in the field, and what happens is Tyler Higbee, the tight end for the Rams, he catches a pass. Kirby Joseph, he goes low. Again, a totally legal hit, but he goes low, hits freaking Higbee in the right knee, and it freaking tears his ACL. He's done. He can't play anymore. And the reason why this definitely got a whole lot of talk, definitely got a whole lot of notice, was that there was an audio recording later where freaking, quarterback Matthew Stafford, he told Kirby Joseph that he's like, yeah, that was a dirty hit. And it's like, Matthew, that's not a dirty hit. It's a legal hit. You can't call something dirty that is legal by the rule book. So that, again, was yet another instance, and we're talking literally within the span of like a month where this was just boom, 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 boom. And this coupled with the previous instance, like I said, it definitely reinforced the notion that not only were the Lions taking this villain mindset to the furthest measure of being dirty, but this also caused some Lions fans some distress, thinking that the Lions were starting to get a bad reputation around the league. Now, I'm saying some people viewed that way. However, there were other Lions fans that they kind of had a welcoming tone to it because they thought it was very similar to the Bad Boys mantra, the Bad Boys identity of the Detroit Pistons back in the late 80s and early 90s. And it was not necessarily because the Pistons were, quote-unquote, a dirty team. It was because they were very physical. They were very imposing with their style of play. So again, depending upon who you talk to, this is definitely going to get some controversy. But that's the second way this whole thing kind of came out. But as with anything, is there a possible third option with this whole viewpoint of the villain identity, the villain mindset? Well, there is. The other option is that the Lions could write the villain identity to the annals of history and simply view it as a blip on the radar. They could just say, hey, you know what? It was here. Now we're just going to kind of shuffle it away. We're not going to deal with it anymore. And kind of view it as, hey, it was a great idea that was kind of rude by a foul, loudmouthed, arrogant player who made his mark, then decided to skip town to go and chase money for the team that he played prior to us. Now, I'm going to just say this. Out of all three options here that we're talking about, I don't see the Lions taking the villain mindset and mantra out over one player who decided to just be a freaking spoilsport and tried to throw a wet blanket on the party. I don't think they're going to do that. I don't see the Lions rescinding this. Rather, what I think is going to happen is that they're going to keep it. Because let's call it for what it is here. Campbell and Holmes are much more mature and much more level-headed than just getting rid of it. I also believe firmly, and I'm going to say this, firmly, Campbell is never, ever, ever going to do anything that is going to disrespect the game of football. Let's understand something. Campbell's never ever going to worry about his players taking the villain mindset, the guys that he actually trusts, the guys that he calls his core players, the guys that are still on his team, taking that villain mindset to a physical level of actually playing dirty. Campbell's not going to stand for that. And furthermore, Campbell most certainly would never, ever condone cheating. Again, Campbell loves the sport of football way too damn much. He would not ever condone something like that. So for me, when you have this thought process that some people think that, oh, the villain mindset might be going way too far off the hinges, I'm telling you this right now, Campbell would never let that happen. He has too much love and too much respect for the game, and he expects the same from his players and how they conduct themselves both on the field and off the field. That's why I'm saying people can say that Kirby Joseph put 2 illegal hits or 2 dirty hits on Hawkinson and Higbee. They weren't illegal hits. They weren't dirty hits. They are totally legal by the rule books, and they are still legal by the rule books. So, kind of wrapping this whole thing up, for me, while the villain mindset, the villain mantra, it may add an unsettling bullseye on our backs as a team, as a fan base, and it might allow people to throw accusations at our way for now, I know that the Lions are used to this kind of adversity. And they kind of take it squarely on the chin because they're like, oh, okay, this is nothing new for us. We're always used to having adversity. But they're not going to make excuses for it. They will use it as fuel to motivate themselves further to achieve their goals, which their goals are not only to win a championship, but to have a dynasty program here in Detroit and to earn the respect of their peers. That's what they're going for. And I totally expect that this is going to be the way it is. We not only have a grit identity, we have a villain identity. But the villain identity is how we play in terms of how do we win games? How do we, go out on the field? We're not talking about being dirty. We're not talking about cheating. We're talking about how we go out and we win games the right way. How we play our brand of football, which is Dan Campbell's style of football, which is all about playing squarely within the rules, playing fair, but it's good, clean football. That's the point here. But anyway, I figured I'd make this episode really quickly because I thought this was a really interesting episode. I thought this would be a really interesting topic. Now, having gone through it, I'm going to end the episode and say thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these 3 things: like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed, you've not had a chance to do so, again, I highly encourage y'all please to subscribe. But I also want to make sure you hit that bell notification icon that goes along with it, so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Also encourage y'all to share the content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share anywhere you have a chance to possibly share it, because the more we share it, the greater the channel has a chance to spread, the greater reach it has, and the greater possibility we have to get more people to come and watch the show. And with that, folks, I just want to say to everybody, thank you all for everything that you guys do. I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you all have got something in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile, and I hope you all enjoyed the content. God bless, and until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.